All right, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to share a portion from a profound writing that we produced um, about a decade or so ago. And it is entitled The Plot to Destroy, Prevent the Rise of the Black Messiah, the FBI's Continuing War on African Americans. Right, this was produced by our Ministry of Information, our minister, Sar Madiel. He was the one that compiled information in this document. And I want to just read a portion of it so it can give us a little bit more insight and clarity into exactly what the European and its objective was from the inception of us, quote unquote, being set free as free men from slavery, and exactly what they were focused on doing and preventing with our people ever since the 20th century, manifested itself, and they began to see African Americans who had the freedom to begin to move our people in a specific direction towards that ultimate objective, which was, revolution. It wasn't just integration. It was us, rebelling against the system and say, you know what, we're out of here. We don't want any part of this. If we can't have what we want, some of us are going to leave. And those individuals that stepped up to push us in that direction, they began to create concerted efforts to prevent it. So I'm going to read this scripture from Matthew chapter 2, verse 16. And it says, Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceedingly wroth and sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem and in all the coasts thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. This was during the season when, it was identified that it was that time for the Messianic individual to rise up in the midst of the, Hebrew Israelite community. Those people that were considered, the chosen of yore, that carried, what we define as the spiritual magna charta, the ability to define exactly what time it was for our people as far as freedom was concerned, and to reunify back under the banner of serving the Holy One of Israel. But that individual, it was time for him to come back and attempt to accomplish this again. And when Herod identified that season, he said, you know what, I'm going to be preemptive and cut off this individual before that individual even gets the opportunity to become a grown man that can do so. And he subsequently went against a campaign to, kill all of the male children under, 2 years old in that season in Judea. But, the same spirit that happened in Yeshua's time happened back in Moses' day. When Pharaoh saw that the male children were, the population of Hebrews was getting out of control, he said, we got to cut them off at the source. Tell the midwives to kill any males that are born amongst them. And the midwives wouldn't do it. And at a certain point, he said, okay, well, we're going to send the soldiers in there and do it for them. But it's the same spirit. They're trying to prevent the rise of this individual from the midst of them. And I'm going to read this quote from Malcolm X. It says, the great curse of history is when we fail to learn or profit from the mistakes of those who have passed on before us. That was a quote from him back in 1958, February 6th. It reads on this wise. Most African Americans with any political consciousness are familiar with the harrowing words of the J. Edgar Hoover-led Federal Bureau of Investigation, with the state objective to, quote, prevent the rise of the Messiah, end quote. The FBI became the only institution in the history of the US government to go on record with the intent to prevent the emergence of a deliverer sent by God. And we, those of us that aren't familiar with this statement, we were given familiarity to it, in the movies. About a year and a half ago, a movie came out called Judas and the Black Messiah, that talked about Fred Hampton and the attempt and the actual success of the Federal Bureau of Investigation to prevent him from unifying the African-American gangs at that time, to be more proactive for the Black community. And he, subsequently, killed him. But in that movie, they had, J. Edgar Hoover state that, hey, we got to prevent the rise of a Black Messiah from unifying and electrifying the Black nationalist movement. So he's on record for saying this specific quote, because he knew, just like Herod did, just like Pharaoh did, that, hey, these Hebrews, they're special. And if we allow them to manifest and come together under the banner of serving Yah Yisrael, nothing will be held back from them. And those Gentile nations would be the only ones that would receive the judgment and the curses that would be the end result of that. So their goal is to prevent that from even happening. So the same tactics are being used in this generation. So likewise, most African Americans are familiar with the efforts of Herod, the Roman governor of antiquity, who sought to prevent the appearance of the anointed deliverer of Yah. The irony is not that the FBI aligned itself with the same spirit which moved Herod in ancient times to destroy all the young males of the Hebrews, who might in fact be the promised deliverer. The irony is that we never in earnest made the connection that the FBI intends to truly destroy the messenger of Yah and not just a Black leader. Make no mistake, the overwhelming majority of the human family professes to believe in and are expecting the appearance of a Messiah. And just as in ancient times, there is a force present seeking to impede the arrival of this divine messenger. And, I gave example already that once African-American leaders stepped up and began to proclaim, hey, we need to unify and actually seek true freedom, leave up out of this hellish, wicked, immoral society and create our own society where we can govern ourselves and truly be human beings. Every time they saw an individual coming to do that, they quickly took them out with no hesitation. By his own statement of purpose in COINTELPRO, which stands for Counterintelligence Program, in subsequent actions, the FBI has identified itself as the instrument to oppose the plan of the Almighty. Moreover, through its persistent efforts to stifle Black leadership, the Bureau has demonstrated their fear that this deliverer will come from among African Americans. Certainly, many would feel that the choice of the term, quote unquote, Messiah by the Bureau was coincidental. It is easier to believe that the FBI has several divisions and is involved in many and diverse fields of intelligence, investigation, and quote unquote law enforcement. Therefore, they were in fact speaking allegorically or even metaphorically, applying words to describe something that is not literally applicable. But emotions and fear aside, history gives us another view. Modern science, genetics, and anthropology continuously affirm that modern man descends from African origins, supporting the biblical historical account. Quote, all non-Africans derive from a single common ancestral population, which migrated out of Northeast Africa, end quote, states Sue Tsuku, Yale University researcher and head of the largest study of genetics and the origins of man. Even in such respected venues as the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, Washington, D.C., exhibits on early man have been corrected to depict an African image. To conclude, then, that the anointed Messiah of God / will be an African image is not a stretch of the imagination or a fit of quote unquote reverse racism. It is the logical expectation. To know then that there must be an institutional force to oppose the appearance of the Messiah, it will come against a people who are of the lineage of the biblical Israelites, moves the discussion beyond allegory. We become witnesses to manifestation of history. And I'm going to skip on down, and I'm going to start on page 6. It says, from its beginnings, the Federal Bureau of Investigation has had little involvement in protecting the rights and liberties of African Americans. Shaped by the prevailing racist thoughts of the day, the FBI was often in league with racist elements of American society. In 1910, the FBI claimed, quote, no authority to protect citizens of African descent in the enjoyment of civil rights generally, end quote. A policy of benign neglect on the part of the United States government in every branch and at every level has been fostered. However, more often than not, the government embarked upon a concerted effort to thwart every positive movement within the Black community. Even a glancing look at the historical record will make clear that an active belligerence against African Americans has been the policy embarked upon the US government, with the FBI as a major antagonist in the scheme. And he continues to go on as how, it began during the era of Marcus Garvey. The FBI was very instrumental in making sure that Marcus Garvey and his movement, which was a Back to Africa movement, which was taking Africans in America and in the Caribbean islands out of these lands and headed back to our own land on the continent. They did their best to prevent that from happening on every front, economically, socially, and legally. So I'm gonna read this portion. So the Honorable Marcus Garvey was determined by J. Edgar Hoover to be, quote, the foremost radical amongst his race, end quote. And as head of the Justice Department Bureau Intelligence Division, he masterminded a strategy to destroy him. Details of the strategy have come to light in various documents, including a 1919 Hoover memo, in which he scarcely concealed his disappointment / frustration at not having found a way to frame Garvey. This is a quote from the book. Unfortunately, however, he has not as yet violated any federal law whereby he could be proceeded against on the grounds of being an undesirable alien from the point of view of deportation. Eventually obtained a minor mail fraud conviction, Hoover was able to successfully deport Garvey in 1927 and remove his Universal Negro Improvement Association as a force in the African American community. Without the leader, the movement became racked with dissension. It never reestablished itself as a significant force in the campaigns for Afro-American political, social, or economic advancement in the United States. Hoover would gain greater power with his promotion to director of the FBI, overseeing the largest national policy agency. He then turned his attention to stopping or otherwise diverting the wave of freedom that was beginning to blow across the US. And then the writing goes on to continue to talk about how the FBI using the counterintelligence program as a means to begin to deflect the power of any African-American leader who was striving to unify African-Americans in a concerted effort to actualize their freedom beyond just the confines of the actual land of America. And individual by individual, this institution within the government of America, they went about illegally in many situations to frame and to try and discredit the actual relevancy of each and every one of these Black leaders. And we ultimately see the objective and have seen the objective of their efforts.